Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's episode is about your children and your money. Parents have many questions when it comes to educating their children about money. When do you start talking to them about money? What about a potential gift or inheritance? And how might a significant gift impact your children socially, economically, and actually their relationships? So to help us understand how to transition wealth to the next generation, I'm joined by Julia Chung, Senior Financial Planner at Spring Planning and Family Business Consultant at Trella Advisory Services. Julia, thank you so much and welcome to Empowered.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am too. And I have to say, I mean, this happening right now was because Carrie Taylor had put a question on Twitter, and there were a whole bunch of us within this question. And you chimed in and I chimed in, and here we are. And you are so passionate about this topic that just can't wait to just keep asking you question after question. So let's begin.
Sounds great.
When does it make sense to start talking to kids about money and finance?
As soon as possible. It's a really big part of everything we do every single day. And I know it can feel really uncomfortable for some people to try and find a formal way to talk to their kids about money. But the reality is that you're dealing with money every single day. And if you're not talking to your kids about it, you're actually choosing not to. So it's really valuable to bring it into the language of everything that you're doing throughout the day. You go to the store with your kids, you order delivery, takeout, you're paying for things all the time. So you can start immediately showing children how money works.
You know, it used to be taboo to talk to your kids about money or talk about it at the kitchen table. But, we are both firm believers that this is really important. But what happens if you have to catch up? So if you haven't spoken to your kids about finances and money, and now they've reached a later stage, how do you catch up?
Well, and it can be really difficult to feel like you're ready. And I think that's one of the big things for people who aren't as comfortable with talking about money as you and I might be. This is what we do all day long. But for those people who are still feeling a bit taken aback and they're like, oh, I think I need to talk to my kids about money now. And they've maybe set up something formal and they're like, oh, okay, now I'm going to be like a teacher. Don't do that. The biggest thing you can do is start just feeling comfortable with money yourself. Start learning. Pick up a couple of books, talk to a great financial advisor, start learning something you think is interesting. When you get interested and you start talking about it, despite how they behave, your kids are interested. They're listening, they're paying attention. Start catching up by starting to include them in the conversation, treating this like something you're interested in learning about, that we shouldn't be afraid of. And you're asking questions, they're asking questions. Let's get the conversation going. Start to make it comfortable.
Okay, so now I'm in a position where I'd love to be able to give my kids some money during my lifetime. Does that make sense for the kids and for me? Or,
Some
or sorry, wait, or should I wait until the end of my lifetime?
Yeah, and the answer is always that financial planners of, well, that answer of that depends, right? And the right answer is the one that fits for you. I always say for parents who are looking to give to their kids, and I do find that Canadians love to give money to their kids. I think you need to first think about, what do I need to be okay? And then what's really possible. The timing of the gift has to be really dependent on what's possible and achievable for you as a person. And then how is that going to work for your child at the life stage that they're in and their psychological space and their emotional space and what they really need right now. Those bits of timing are going to be unique to you.
Okay, so we only have about 30 seconds left before we go to break, but I want to talk about, what do I need to think about before I decide how much I can give and when?
The big thing is to start with yourself. Really go through and get a good in-depth, comprehensive financial plan where you understand how much money you need to be okay, cover your needs, and then see what might actually be available to be left to give.
Okay, so when we come back, we're going to talk more about gifting to your children, who to speak to. Why is this important? Because nobody wants to have surprises along the way. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more with Julia Chung. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. On today's episode, we're discussing transitioning wealth to the next generation. So, Julia, if I was to do this, what do I need to think about before I decide the way I need to give?
There's a lot to think about. So there's, first of all, like we were saying before the break, the things about your own well-being and your own financial plans, and then think about, then that tells you how much you can give, and then now you need to think about the tax implications of a gift. Is it make sense from a tax perspective to make that gift now in a big chunk, in little pieces? What's going on as far as your cash flow and tax implications? And then what do your children need and when? A lot of the parents I talk to might want to give a significant gift when their children graduate university, or they plan for things like weddings, which I always find very entertaining because they put it in their plan for, oh, when they're 25, I'm going to pay for a wedding for my child. And I keep saying, well, that's not as common anymore. It might be something a little later. So do you want to give them a gift anyways? Why are we giving them the gift? And what's it for? How are we going to start having conversations with them about that gift?
And so that's my next question. How and when do you start speaking with your children about a potential gift or inheritance? Because, that may backfire if your child knows that they're getting a huge gift in 6 months or 2 years or whatever.
Absolutely. So we have to think about the expectations that we're setting with our children. And that all kind of goes back to your own family values. That's where I always want to start with families, is saying, what are your values around money and gifting? What's the lesson you want to teach your child? And what are we doing first around those lessons? Whether, for some people, it's, well, I want to make sure that the child knows that they are financially independent and feels really confident before I give them a gift. And maybe I want it to be a surprise. Well, let's think about what that looks like first. And then as you approach that point where you're feeling like your child has achieved living through the values that you wanted to pass on, that's when you start having the conversation. But I don't like the idea of just surprising them with a check.
And surprises are awful. I don't like surprises. I prefer not to know of any surprises because typically they're bad. They're not on the good side. But I want to talk about the gift. What if the gift isn't money, isn't a check that you had just talked about, but it's actually a form of real estate, whether it's a house or a rental or something, or even an active business? How does that change the conversation?
Drastically, drastically changes the conversation. I see the real estate piece happening quite a bit in families from my own culture. Chinese families often will purchase real estate, and they're going to plan to give this to their children at some point in time. But we still need to think about, what are the tax implications? Is this a burden to a certain extent that your child really has the capacity to, or the desire to carry? Are you giving them something that they think will actually be a gift? Is this a home that has got like a leaky roof and isn't in the right location where they want to live, or does it have tenants and they never wanted to be a landlord? You need to be able to have the right conversations with them. Don't assume that a gift that you would enjoy is the gift that your child would enjoy. And of course, that goes even more so towards an active business. A lot of families have this business that's been passed down from generation to generation, or a farm, and there's an expectation that this child or all the children are going to take over, and we haven't actually talked to them about it. And then we surprise them with this expectation at some point, and they might say, well, actually, I was going to be a police officer, or I've been going to law school because I meant to go to law school, or I'm leaving the country. I'm not interested. We need to be having conversations far in advance about what people want, and recognize our children as whole humans who make adult decisions about their lives and what they want.
And I think a lot of that has to do with your ethnic background as well. A lot of parents have this vision for their kids, whether it's right or wrong. They haven't discussed it with their child, and this is what is expected of them. But the other thing too is if you're gifting a property, especially if it's in the United States, you have to understand what the rules are so that you're not paying taxes in both countries, because that becomes an even larger burden upon your children. We're going to talk about that when we return. So please don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's episode, we're discussing transitioning wealth to the next generation. Now, Julia, I saw your face when I talked about, parents gifting their children a property that's, in the United States. Say it's a house in Florida or Arizona or whatever. What are the implications there?
There are so many. And I think because we're so close with the United States, it feels like it's not really that different of a country. We know that we've got a tax treaty with them if you know a little bit, and you think, well, it's just in the South. It'll be fine. But the thing is that the tax regime in the United States is drastically different than that of Canada. And despite the fact that we have a wonderful tax treaty in many ways, the complexity of owning property in the United States or having US citizenship or residency in your family, which happens all the time for Canadians because most of us live on the border, creates a plethora of tax issues. Please don't go into that lightly.
Good. Yeah, you know what? Good words of wisdom, because people go in and think, oh, my friend told me this, my friend told me that. And they don't speak to professionals, yet they speak to their friends over a glass of wine at a party. And all of a sudden, their friends are the truth. But yes, speak to a professional before you do anything. I want to move on now. How might a significant gift impact your children, whether it's socially, economically, or even in their relationships?
So, what's really interesting about this that I think a lot of people don't realize is that when we move from one socioeconomic level to another, no matter what our age is, this really impacts our social standing. And you'd think that a move up would impact it positively, but this is Canada. And we are people who tend to be pretty modest, and creating a distance between yourself and your social network through a socioeconomic change, especially a very sudden one, can create massive rifts. People can suddenly feel, oh, you've got all this money, you've got, this house purchased for you, and I'm over here with this. We're now very different people. I have very strong ideas about what it means for someone to be in this socioeconomic class that I'm not in. So I'm not going to hang out with this person anymore. It can also have really strong impacts on your child's relationship. So, an example that is from real life is one where a parent had gifted the ownership of a home into a couple, and the wife was the daughter was the inheritor of it, and the husband actually had such a hard time dealing with the size of this gift and what it meant and the implications that he actively disassociated from the home itself. He wouldn't clean it, he would not get the door handles changed, he wouldn't do any repairs, and eventually he moved out. He could not live in this home because it was this gift, it wasn't his. He felt like there was an intrusion into their relationship. It's really surprising what an impact this can make, and it's so important that we're careful. Parents feel correctly that they're giving their children something wonderful, but the impacts are incredible. And if we don't have great conversations ahead of time, we can really, really cause harm.
And that's the whole thing. I mean, we have to have conversations in every relationship, whether it's your spouse, your parents, your friends. Um, you know, Being transparent and having these conversations is really, really important. I want to move on to trusts. You hear a lot of people talk about trusts. When does a trust make sense? Because it's not for everyone.
It isn't, and I get this question a lot, particularly when somebody has received sudden wealth or they have moved up a couple of classes and they suddenly say, "Oh, it looks like I'm in this space. Does that mean I need a trust now?" And that's a reasonable question because we hear about these things, trust fund babies and that kind of stuff. So what is important to remember is that a trust does not necessarily come with it's not mandatory because wealth happened. A trust is a tool that we can use to transition wealth, to manage taxes, not necessarily avoid them, despite what people think. But it takes extra planning. It costs extra money, and a whole bunch of experts are needed to be involved. This may not be for you. You need support before you take steps there.
And you know what? I like the fact that you said it costs money because a lot of people think I'm going to do this because it's cheaper, but you really have to surround yourself with professionals in order to take that next step. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. On today's episode, we're discussing transitioning wealth to the next generation. Today, I'm joined by Julia Chung, Senior Financial Planner at Spring Planning and Family Business Consultant at Trella Advisory Services. And I think this next question is really important. What do I prepare in the meantime while I still own all of my assets, my businesses, to ensure that I don't leave a tragic mess? Because no one wants surprises or a tragic mess.
No, they don't. And we often don't prepare these things because we're in the middle of this space where we're still thinking about it. And it can be really hard to create a plan saying to ourselves, well, in 5 years, this might change, or in 2 years, that might change. So maybe I'll hold off on creating these, documentations and plans and that sort of stuff until I know what's happening then. And what I always say is, hey, let's create a plan for now. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now. You have a guess. But why don't we create an estate plan for right now? If the absolute worst thing was going to happen and you either become incapacitated, you become disabled, or you pass away unexpectedly, what would you like that to look like right now? And you might say, well, I don't know because this is getting complicated. That's great. Talk to experts. Talk to your financial planner, your lawyer, your accountant. Let's create a structure that allows that transition to happen if it needs to, or the care to happen if you need it right now. Once the plan's in place, all you have to do is tweak it. All we have to do is make small changes.
We've mentioned a lot about surrounding yourself with professionals. What kind of expert support does anyone need as they navigate through these transitions?
Well, I mean, I think, of course, tooting my own sort of horn, I think somebody who does truly comprehensive financial planning. And when I say financial planning, I really do mean the big picture, the holistic plan that looks at every aspect of your life, not just an investment plan, which is an important component, but everything that's involved in it. What's your cash flow? What are your goals? What do you want to do in the future? How are we protecting your financial independence? What sort of structures do you have? What sort of structures do you need? What's your legal documentation? A truly comprehensive financial planner can help you get a handle on what the big picture is and then walk through different scenarios about what's possible so you can make really good decisions. And then from there, you can work with professionals who can create legal documents or the right kind of accounting structures, or start a family business conversation with all of your family members so that you can work through those next steps. But without that 10,000-foot view, it can be really, really hard to understand what those next steps are.
And that's just it. I mean, all of this is pretty overwhelming for someone who isn't in the business and they don't know what to do. So what would the what would be the best first step right now? How does somebody begin to, you know, get this plan in motion and be prepared?
Well, I think the thing is to talk to a professional, and really, I know a lot of people think that maybe they can do their own financial planning or they think they should. But I really want to impress upon people that someone who has a CFP designation has to complete 25 hours of continuing education every single year at the bare minimum to keep up with the complexities of what's going on in order to stay relevant. You don't have time for that. This isn't a requirement of you in your life. Please get professional help for this because it's gonna be really, really hard. I don't try to fix my own car. I don't even try to change my oil by myself because that is not my wheelhouse. So, I will go to the experts to take care of my car. Please go to the experts to help you take care of your money.
Julia, thank you so much for your words of wisdom. I know that you and I are pretty much on the same page. And I love the fact that we can sit and talk about this and just keep going on for hours. And this is the first time we met, and I feel like I've known you forever. So thank you so much for being on Empowered.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
It was. When it comes to transitioning wealth to the next generation, speak to a professional before you gift. When in doubt, speak with your financial planner, accountant, and/or lawyer. Gifting with professional advice can help avoid unintended outcomes such as relationship breakdowns, increased administration, and unnecessary costs. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski, and I'm here to empower you and make frugality fashionable. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye for now.